On this video, I'm going to show you how to turn any image off of the internet into an applique for your bag making, for your Cricut or your Silhouette, your cutting machine. Okay, so I've opened up the SVG file for this bag pattern. This is the Meow bag. You can find the link to that in the description below. And I have got all the pieces that go with this particular SVG. Now we're only working with the front slip pocket. So I'm just going to drag that over onto the grey and make that so that it's a bit bigger so we can see what we're working with. Okay, then I want to drag my image. I found an image off of the internet. I'm going to drag that in as well. And I'm going to put that, drag that next to it. Okay, now obviously it's a different size and we want to make sure we don't change the size of our pattern piece, but we change the size of the image to fit. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to change our SVG so that it is a clear fill. And then we're going to do the drop down for the stroke. If it shows like this and there's no colours in there, you can do Shift and click and that brings up more options. So I'm going to change that to black and I'm going to change it to a 3-point so we can see that a bit better. Next we want to see our layers. So we click on Window, Layers, and we want to make sure that our Hello Kitty is at the bottom underneath. Okay, then we can move our Hello Kitty underneath of that file, of that pattern piece, and we're going to squish and make it the size that we need. Okay, so we're going to squish it, and we want to bear in mind that this pattern piece does have a 1 centimetre seam allowance, so we're going to allow for that a little bit too. So that's about roughly the right size. Okay, make it a bit wider. And you can do that more accurately if you have a grid on, which you can do with View, Show Grid. I'm not going to worry about that right this minute. Okay, so now we've got our image that we're working with. We know it's the right size. So I'm going to take that away, our pattern piece. We don't need that for the minute. And then I'm going to start. Let's drag it over here actually. And then we want to, of course, take out the elements that we're going to be putting on top of the slip pocket. So for us, this is going to be this big bow, the eyes, the nose, and the whiskers. Okay, so with the bow, it's not symmetrical. So we do want to draw around that. So we're going to use our pencil tool. There it is. So we want to use our pencil tool and we're going to draw around the shape. I'm going to use a red so that I can see what I'm doing. And we're just going to freehand draw that round. Draw around that. The great thing about Illustrator is it sort of smooths it off, which is perfect for this kind of thing. So we're just tracing. Doesn't matter if it's not perfect. Now I've gone a bit wobbly there, but that's okay. Let's zoom in some more. Oops. Okay, so we can see our shape there. Then what we can do, which is really cool, is we can use our smooth tool, which is within that same tool. And if you just put the smooth tool along the line that you want smoothed out, can you see it's altering that path? Whoops. So we can make that go a lot better. So that's really helped to smooth that around. And you can do it anywhere that looks like it might need it. particularly good for the jagged areas. I think that's it for now. Then we're going to go in and we're just going to neaten up some of these points. So I'm going to click on there, make that a bit better. Pull that in. And keep going until you're happy with the point that it's at. You can use these little handles to kind of bend the shape around a bit more as well. And make it look as close as you can to that original shape. Okay. So now we've got our main bow shape that we will be cutting out of black vinyl. Or in my case, actually, I'm going to be using navy blue, but you could be doing it out of any sort of dark colour. Then we want to go ahead and make these inner shapes. Now that middle one is almost a circle. So we're going to go ahead and get the ellipse tool and make it as close as we can to that shape and size. Oh, that's pretty spot on. Let's just make that a bit bigger. There we go. So that's our middle circle. And then we're going to go and draw around the inner shapes, just like we did before. Now you could do this process for any applique. Really, you can just trace over the image. You could take a photo of something, upload it into Illustrator and draw over it. This makes so many possibilities with your Cricut and bag making. Okay, so we're nearly there. Just make those last shapes. And then you can tidy them up if you want to. They're not too bad. Okay, I think I'm going to just smooth off some of those areas. Oops, need to select it first. You can smooth off those corners. Everything else I think looks okay. Let's do that one shape over here as well. Okay, I think we're pretty good to go. Okay, so now we want to do the same with the eyes and the nose. So for the eyes and the nose, they're all the same shape. So we're just going to make an ellipse. That's pretty spot on. And move the same one over to the other eye. There we go, we've got our two eyes. And then we're going to do the same for the nose. Move it around at an angle. And the nose is a bit bigger. So we're just going to pull that out to that shape. And we're going to make a smaller one for the inner. Oops. There we go. That's pretty good. Then we want to make our whiskers. So we've got our bow, we've got our eyes, we've got our nose. We're then going to make our whiskers. So to do that, I'm going to get the rounded rectangle tool and I'm going to make it roughly the right size in width. And then I'm going to go ahead to my direct selection tool. And what we actually want to do before we do our direct selection tool is we want to add an anchor point. So we want to do the add anchor point tool and we want to make it about the middle. Go back to our direct selection tool and we're going to pull that up because the whiskers are kind of bent at an angle. And then we're going to go back to our smooth tool and we're going to smooth that line out, top and bottom. So now we've got a really nice rounded whisker. I'm not sure what's happened there on the end, so that's okay. I'm just going to pull that out. Oops. Okay, I'm going to turn that slightly. That is pretty spot on there. So I'm going to copy and paste. Whoops, not that one. I'm going to select the whole thing, copy and paste, so that we've got our second whisker. What I am going to do, quickly make my life easier, is lock that Hello Kitty layer, the image below. So I've just put a little lock within the layers window. Lock that so I can't move that out the way like I just did. And we're going to make our second whisker down. It is a bit different, the second whisker, so I'm going to make that a bit shorter and smaller. I'm going to get the smooth tool again, try and make it a different shape. If that doesn't work, we can get our direct selection again and just pull different bits in. Oops. Help if I made it a bit closer, wouldn't it? Make my life easier, not harder. And the way that Hello Kitty in particular is drawn is it's quite kind of, it's not perfect, which is quite nice for us. It means we don't have to be perfect with our shape drawing. Then I'm just going to delete some of those anchor points as well. Which one shall I delete? So that one, and then I can do there we go, that's pretty good. We're getting there. Okay, that looks good. Then we're going to do the same with the third one. I'm going to go from the top one. Make sure I've got the selection tool. Make that for the third one. Not too much work on that one. That's pretty good. Now we've got our 3 whiskers. Then we want to select them all, copy and paste. And what we can do is drag them over here, and then we can do object, transform, reflect. And then we've got our other side as well. Now they are slightly different, as you can see, aren't they? So we'll just twist those a bit, make sure that they are very similar. Like I say, they are not quite symmetrical. Hello Kitty's not quite symmetrical. Okay, there we go. We've got all our shapes. Now, how I'm going to do it is that I'm going to do the back of the ear, so that when you look at the back, you're not seeing, the back of the bow. So when you look at the back, because this is a slip pocket on this pattern, you're going to see that top bit, and I don't want that to be like the backing of the vinyl. So I'm going to be cutting 2 of this shape. So I'm going to make 2 of those shapes, and I'm going to reverse that, because that is then going to be the back. When you place the vinyl onto the cutting mat, you're going to place it face down onto the mat, so it's going to cut it in reverse. So that's then going to be the back of the bow. Hopefully that makes sense. Then we're going to want to have the back of the whiskers, because the same thing is going to peek out the side. So I'm going to copy and paste those. that is going to be the back of those. And then if I copy and paste these, that is going to be the back of the other one, the other side. Okay, so we've got all our whiskers. I'm then going to change the stroke to black on those. Actually, what I'm going to do is I want to take off the stroke and fill it with black. If your swatches goes like mine did there, if you do shift and hold down, you get up a basic palette. If you have that same issue that I have sometimes, I'm going to turn the stroke off again, turn it to black, and same with these ones. Black, no stroke. And then I'm going to do these red pieces first. Doesn't really matter what red it is, but there we go. And then we want to make that one black and no stroke. Okay, so you can see also that helps. You can see that that line's not quite there, so let's just smooth that off again, make that a nicer shape. There we go. There, that's not a bit nicer now on that line. Want to make sure we've got our yellow nose. Okay, so now we've got all our shapes. Let's make that black again. Okay, and now we've got our shapes. Let's turn off our Hello Kitty so we can't see her. And we want to make all of these shapes compound paths. I've just seen this line again is a little bit wonky. So I'm just gonna make that a bit smoother. Make this side a bit smoother. Okay, that's pretty good. This edge a bit smoother. And because I've done that, I'm going to need to object transform, reflect. Okay, get rid of that one so that they're the same. Okay, now we need to make each of these shapes a compound path. Okay, so we want to click on each one, go Object, Compound Path, Make, each single one, go through and do that to all of them. Okay, so now I've done all of those shapes and then I'm going to want to save it. So what I do is I can do a new artboard with the artboard tool. Just put it completely over all our different shapes. And then we can go ahead to File, Save a Copy. Because we've still got our artboard tool up, we can see that it's artboard 2, so we want to go ahead and call it, I'm going to call this Hello Kitty Face, and we want to save it as an SVG. So we click on SVG, use artboards, artboard 2, save. Okay, then we're going to go ahead to our design space and we're going to want to upload our image in. So go to upload, Here we go, I did it a bit earlier, so we're going to click on that one, add to canvas. And in this one, I didn't have that other image, the back of the bow, so I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to flip that so it's reversed. Then I've got all my different shapes. Click on Make It. It's going to put it into the different matte colours. And I can go ahead and cut that. So that is all my black. I've then got all my red there, and I've got my tiny bit of yellow. I haven't got any yellow vinyl, so I'm going to use HTV for the yellow bit. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that out with the black and the red. I'm going to do that onto vinyl. Like I say, the vinyl is going to be face side down, and I'm going to use a fine point blade. Okay, so you want to make sure that your mirror is on, because we are doing it right side down. So turn our mirror on. Not that it really matters because everything is symmetrical, but we're going to do that anyway. Make sure that our mirror is on with the bow ones as well. The yellow, I mean, yeah, may as well, but a symmetrical shape, so it doesn't really matter. So let's go ahead and do that. We don't need a long mat, but I am going to use a long mat just because that's what I've got available. And we can see, if we click on our mat, we can see, if it will let us, how wide the cutting area is. So I'm going to make sure that I cut my vinyl to fit that. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches long in height. Take 2. Just going to cut out that extra bow that messed up before, and there's one of the whiskers that didn't cut out before as well, so I'm just cutting those out to match. Okay, so I've cut out all my pieces. I've got the bow doubled up on itself, and I've just placed the pieces on top. I think they look really good. I'm really pleased. So I've got my yellow HTV, and by the way, if you're doing projects like this and sometimes you just need the odd random colour, instead of getting huge rolls, I really recommend, there's a pack on Amazon, I will link to it in the description below, and then you've got kind of every colour that you need. They do glittery sheets as well. It's also a really good way to try out kind of different colours for HTV. So we want to, because we did it mirror side down, we want to just peel off the back. It is super important that you do it mirror side down with the HTV. So I've peeled off the backing, and then we want to just heat press that down onto the middle of the nose. And I'm just going to go ahead and heat that onto the vinyl, being really careful. I'm going to put another Teflon sheet over the top and not leave it on for too long. Okay, so now we've got our nose in place. So when it comes to the bow, we're going to want to glue around the outside edge, just a thin amount. This is fabric glue, by the way. You can use double-sided tape if you want to. Don't want to put too much on because it's got to go under your needle. Then we want to make sure all these different elements are placed in the right place. So I'm going to go for the central part first. like I say, if you want to do this instantly, you can go for your double-sided. So I'm going to leave that to dry for a few minutes, and then I'm going to come back and attach it to the front slip pocket. Okay, so now we're going to attach it to our front slip pocket. So we've got our front slip pocket there. I am going to, first of all, actually, not going to attach it just yet. I'm going to stitch around those pink inner shapes. Okay, so I'm not going to stitch it onto the slip pocket yet. I'm just going to stitch around the pink shapes first. Okay, so now that the pink parts are appliqued on, we can position it in place. Now we've got our seam allowance where it's going to be basted to the outer part of the bag there. So I'm just going to shift it over, tweak it over a bit so that we avoid that. Then we want to pop our eyes and our nose on, whoops. And we're going to use double-sided to keep those in place. Okay, so for the whiskers, I have just realised that that is way too fiddly to sew on the machine. I don't know why I didn't think about that before. Of course, because normally appliqué, you're stitching it down to something, but floating in midair, that tiny little slither is just a bit rubbish. So I have a solution. What I'm going to do is I've got this scrap here. I'm going to put some double-sided underneath, so I've got a sandwich of the vinyl. Wrong sides together. And then just using a silver gel pen, because it will rub off, I'm going to draw around each whisker. So I know I want 2 of those. Don't really need to flip it because we can do it, just flip it up ourselves because of sewing. Doesn't matter if it's a bit blotchy like that. And then I'm going to stitch that on the machine, and then we can cut around the shapes after. Okay, so that is a much better solution. I'm going to push my cut ones out of the way. A little bit of a waste of time, which is a bit frustrating, but there we are. Sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error. And before I cut these, I'm going to pull the threads through to the back and knot each one. Okay, now I've cut the threads and tied them all behind. I'm going to cut around those silver lines. Now obviously I'm going to use a little bit of artistic license. I want to make it even around my stitches as well. And you can see that they're perfectly matched on both sides. So I'm going to do that with all of the 6 whiskers. Okay, so I've wiped the whiskers down with a damp cloth, and now I'm going to place them onto the face where I want them to go. And I want to make sure that I've got them in the right order and that the little knots are on the back and towards the middle of the face, the knots that we tied. Then I'm going to place a little tiny bit of double-sided to keep that in place. Now obviously we've got our 1 centimetre seam allowance, so you want to think about that. I'm going to put mine in a little bit more. Okay, so now I'm going to top stitch around the edge of the bow and around the eyes and the nose, and then for the whiskers I'm just going to top stitch around those top corners so that when we baste it and sew it to the outside part of the bag, we can pull that up and make sure it's really out of the way of the seam allowance. Okay, so here is all of the pieces appliqued on. So I used a 2.5 stitch length on all of the pieces. Normally I would use a 4 on my top stitching, so I've used a 4 around the top edge of my cat, but on the applique pieces I used a 2.5. That is so that you can get around those corners a bit nicer, you can hit those edges better. I do that for my zipper holes as well, as I will show you when we come to that. I have stitched on just the ends of the whiskers like I mentioned, so that I can push those up when it comes to sewing up the rest of the bag and they're not going to get caught. And I didn't stitch around the yellow, I left that because it's the HTV, and I've sewed, like I say, all those different pieces on. On the back you can see I have used the same colour thread. You don't have to do that, you can use the lining thread. Because of how this bag is, it's a slip pocket, you're not really going to see inside, but for the bow especially, because you're stitching through, you're going to see that. So I wanted to make sure, you're going to see it on the back of the vinyl, I wanted to make sure that it's the same colour throughout. Then what I did to hide all the ends is I didn't go backwards and forwards on each one. I left a long tail, pulled the tails through to the back, tied a knot, and then with a needle, I threaded a needle with those threads, and then I threaded that inside in between the layers, and then popped the needle out and cut it so that the thread is hidden inside, and then you don't have the knots on the back so much. I did that on these main ones where you're going to see it. On the edge I just threaded it through, you can still see the knot a bit, and I threaded it out the other side. You're never going to get to those. I just wanted to make sure with little hands going in and out of that slip pocket that you couldn't feel the knot and rub it away and compromise the top stitching. And here's the finished bag. I really hope that you found this useful. Do leave any comments or questions you may have in the comments section below, and I'll see you in the next video.